Welcome to 2023. Welcome to a new year of the podcast. This episode with Lauren Aletta is so good. It is so powerful. And if this is setting the precedent for what the episodes this year are going to be like, I'm so excited. And I know you all love to go deep. And this episode goes really deep. I love having conversations with Lauren. I will link her episode from last year on the podcast. But every single time we get in this space where we can have these conversations, the depths that we go to is just fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And as always, divine timing, synchronicities, just everything on my path. Like this year, Lauren talks about it being, the year of the heart. And I feel like it's been the year of the body. And she has a lot of Taurus energy. Her rising is in Taurus, and she's got Chiron in Taurus. I have my sun in Taurus. I have my Mercury in Taurus. And as it relates to astrology, my sun is in her first house and her sun is in my eighth house. So it's just like this really like going deep and going big, especially this year, because I know we've both been feeling it. But yeah, this episode just, we talk about communicating from our energy, coming back to ourself, like remembering who we are. We talk a lot about Atlantis, and Atlantis is one of those things that I've really been deep diving into. And it began this year. I'd kind of been leaning to or learning, started with Pleiades and then Lumeria. And then Lauren had a Reconnect and Recode program in the spring, this past spring, that I was a part of. And so she really deep dove into Atlantis. And that kind of just like sparked that maybe a remembrance. And because I've learned a lot even since recording this podcast on Atlantis. A lot has come up for me in documentaries, Gaia TV, all sorts of things. Books have been talking about Atlantis. I just read The Calling by Rochelle, and in there she talks about Atlantis and Lumeria. And a lot of this cycle that we're in now is going back to this time of Atlantis. A lot of reincarnations happening now are happening for the intent of Atlantean karma. We talk about Atlantis, or Lauren explains Atlantis as it relates to the ego and the I. And as I've learned since, Atlantis was a time where technology was really advanced, but we got very egoic, very material, very shadowy. And I could go into that in so many ways, but there's actually a fascinating Netflix documentary that I've been watching called I think it's called Ancient Apocalypse by Graham Hancock. And he was actually on the Aubrey Marcus podcast, and he was on Joe Rogan, but it was absolutely fascinating. So I've been going down this like rabbit hole about Atlantis in Lumeria kind of since the whole premise of Ancient Apocalypse was Graham Hancock was finding evidence of this ancient civilization and predating what we're told is the history of humans. And it just was really fascinating. So I won't go too much into that, but we do touch on a lot of Atlantis in this episode, and it is absolutely fascinating. We had this past Friday our New Year's ceremony, and it's been really interesting. I think as I'm coming into like my 6-3 style of learning and coming back to myself, because that's been really important. The message has been coming strong lately, just coming back to myself and trusting what my body feels and what that is saying and what that means for me. I know, of course, it's been like New Year's, and I've been having to like stay off social media because so many people are talking about their opinions on intention setting and resolutions and why we should do it or why we shouldn't do it. And I feel, because I have this open G center, often I feel not swayed, but I can feel convinced, I suppose. I guess I feel the energy of the intent of the individual. And it's really important for me to check in with myself and come back to myself. I didn't necessarily set intentions this year. We did the New Year's ceremony, and the intention behind that was more so to identify what we want to manifest, and then coming back to ourselves and being able to reprogram, rewire, and be able to move towards those things, and noticing when these shadows are coming up or when the triggers are coming up, so that we can reprogram and actually manifest and call in things that we're really wanting. And I just truly believe like everything is as it's meant to be. Like everything is as it's meant to be. Wherever we are in life, we are experiencing exactly what we're meant to be experiencing. And in this episode, Lauren talks about relationships And I was, by two different energy readers, psychics, was told this past June would be a massive shift for me. And we dig into that in a little bit in this episode, because it was last year, I think last October, when Lauren had first brought this up, this June thing. And it kind of like stuck out to me, because of course I think when someone says something's going to shift in a time frame, we're like, oh, what's it going to be? Is it going to be something huge? And my perspective on my worth grew. My perspective on relationships grew. And something that Lauren said in this episode, she talks about our expectation, or our idea of a relationship is so different to each individual. We all have different needs. So it's like people say, you know, you need to have this in a relationship, and this makes a happy relationship. This makes a good relationship. And it's like so individual, and it doesn't just apply to relationships. It applies to everything, because we're all on our own unique journey in this lifetime, learning the things that we're uniquely supposed to be learning. And so again, coming back to yourself and trusting like, everyone says this is really important in a relationship, but doesn't really feel important for me. But this over here feels really important to me, and it's never really talked about, right? So like coming back and trusting yourself and knowing what feels right for you in your heart, in your body, and your body will tell you, right? Your body will let you know. And I found I've been able to communicate those needs, those things that are coming up to me more easily than I was able to before. And I feel like that was that massive shift. But Lauren talks about the energy kind of like from now up until I believe around like September. And it's always, I love listening to her talk from the lens too of astrology, because she talks about May being this revolutionary time. And it's about like April, mid-April, where Pluto retrogrades back into Aquarius. And we know Aquarius is technology. It is all the things, you know, it is breaking systems and molds to create something new. And it's the rebel, right? It is revolutionary in that sense. And it kind of goes back into that. And then about mid-June, it goes back into Capricorn. So it's kind of, we get a release of that energy. She talks about July being a lot softer energy. And right around that time too, it squares the North Node in Taurus. So it's just like, it's just so fascinating. I love like relating the two. But yeah, it's just this conversation was really, really great. I always love having conversations with Lauren, and she was on the podcast last year, and it was definitely one of your favorites. So I'm so excited to share this episode again with you this year. That is my intro. I'm going to keep it short and sweet. The Mastery Monday email, if you're not on that email list, that goes out every Monday, and I talk about human design transits, give a little bit of human design lesson. I've been doing a series on the centers and including in there a chakra clearing meditation. So you can go through and clear your chakras as you're learning about your chakras. And of course, you can go to the website, RochelleChristian.com, and get your human design charts personalized, customized, and you're going to get an email series when you get your chart to explain the basics of your chart and how to understand it if you're not familiar with human design. HD Attached, the program, 101 program, is available. I'm so excited. It's been, again, feedback has been great. It is combining human design and attachment theory. And we go through, identify your shadows, identify your core wounds. We work through them. We have tools to rewire your neural pathways so that we can actually, identify your needs, express your needs, set boundaries, all the things, so that you can move through it and just come back to that authentic self and come back to yourself and remember who you are, all these things that we talk about. February, I'm going to be doing HD Attached as a small group container. This past week, this New Year's event that we did really reminded me how powerful group containers can be, to be able to connect with others, to be able to share energy with others. And within that, it's also discerning, you're learning to come back to yourself, and you're learning that you are not alone in that, and reading the energy. It was such a beautiful, powerful 2 hours in so many different ways. And I might just do an episode kind of around that. A lot of shadows were coming up at the same time, and a lot of just like moving forward and trusting myself. And it was just really cool all around. So those are available. All the information is down in the show notes. And you can do a one-on-one, just a one-off one-on-one human design reading as well. Of course, that's always going to be human design and astrology combined together. But those are all the ways that you can work with me if you're interested in the new year. And yeah, I hope you had a relaxing, grounded holiday season. Now we're kind of like back to the grind, I guess. And I didn't even make it till midnight on New Year's Eve. I just had dinner and was sleeping by 11, and it was wonderful. And I was really reaffirmed, I guess, or I felt the next day, or today is New Year's Day when I'm recording this. But yeah, being able to like function without being hungover was kind of nice, was definitely a perk of not drinking. Again, I won't say that I was not tempted during the holidays at some point. Even like last night on New Year's Eve, for a second, I was like, should I have a glass of wine and just like celebrate the new year? But I was like, no, I'm really, apart from the fact that it's just like so much part of like our culture and our everyday like life, right? Is centered around alcohol. It's so much. It's like really knowing that I don't have to have that as part of like my everyday anymore. And there's nothing wrong with it being part of your everyday, because I was, that was part of my life for so many years, but I just like feel so good. Yeah. So that is the intro, and this episode is just phenomenal. So share with a friend if it resonates with you. Rate, review, subscribe. If you review on Apple iTunes, it's really, really helpful to just get more people to hear it, more ears. And I appreciate you all so much. And I'm really looking forward to all the episodes that are coming to you this year, all the amazing people I have on the podcast. So I thank you for your time, your energy. You can find me on Instagram at Rochelle.Christiane. That is ROCHELLE.CHRISTIANE. It is TikTok is the same thing. Website is RochelleChristiane.com. And if you are watching on Instagram, or sorry, if you're watching on YouTube, or you would like to watch on YouTube, that handle is at Emotional Mastery Podcast. Again, everything is linked in the show notes. Well, welcome back to the podcast. Today I have Lauren Aletta of Inner Hue, and you were on the podcast, I believe it was last January, and it was definitely one of the most popular episodes. Everybody loved it. I love being in your energy. I love having conversations with you. So thank you so much for coming back on the podcast to talk about the energy you're feeling, the collective, Atlantis, Lumeria. We're going to touch on a little bit of all of it. But if you want to start just kind of introducing yourself to the listeners who may not know who you are, and yeah, we can go from there.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back, actually. I love conversations. I love just let's talk about all the things and all the weird stuff. So I'm always thrilled when someone wants to do that with me. And yeah, what do I do? I read energy is like the real simple and clear way when I go for my morning walk and people ask, oh, what do you do when that conversation comes up? I read energy. Sometimes men think that's reading the energy box on houses. Which is really cute. And then you should see their faces as I'm like, no, just sort of like this. And there's like, oh, kind of change. But yeah, like I don't really know how to describe it. I work one-on-one sessions with people. And essentially, I just tune into their in-body and out-of-body energy system and layers of their field, and really just perceive, really observe or listen to what's going on and be able to sort of convey that. And I especially love working with people when they're in really big, powerful transitions. Sometimes it can feel really hard. Hang on. Mm-hmm. Sometimes it can feel really hard because, dark night of the soul, big stuff. And then other times I get to work with people when they're really in their big level up, as well as in between. And I like to, I don't know if I want to call it teach, but I like to share information, a little more in-depth information, to empower people to understand that understanding your intuition, understanding your natural psychic abilities and the different ways you can perceive information that is going to be unique to you, and how that can just really support you in your life, as well as in your sort of soul and human evolution, which I think is even more important than in your life. Like, there is a beautiful benefit from knowing how to understand your intuition and being able to utilize it to support yourself in the creation of your life, But I think there's even something more potent and powerful in understanding that we're on this really incredible journey as a unique soul, and we have so much to draw from in terms of our wisdom and knowledge. And we are so held in the universe, um, and that it is through the conscious evolution of ourselves that um, we get to play a really significant role um, in the universe or in the creation of worlds, and are able to be of service to then other beings and other human forms that will also come through. There's this kind of cool hierarchy. So I don't know. I like to think about all the things.
Yeah. One thing I love about whether it's getting a session from you or this past spring, I was in your Reconnect and Recode, it's just like it opened your mind to so much. Right. And like you say, that like the way you teach, it was very empowering in a way because you give this information. But I found that a lot of the answers, people sometimes want to know specifics, like, how do I do this? How do I get there? And your response is very much like it's almost like you hesitate to teach your way, right? Because you want to empower people to find their way. So it was like there was so much information. It was so fascinating. And it sometimes, at a couple points for me personally, it almost felt like my mind was getting so into it, right?
Yeah.
But it also it also really empowered me because there wasn't like a clear path of like you do XYZ and then this happens, right? So I was
Mhm.
able to come back to myself and like take all of the information that you had given, whether I logically understood it or not, right? It was a lot of information that needed to like settle and like really like kind of integrate in that way, but then come back to myself and find out how I would get there,
Yeah.
and I love that. I love that.
Yeah, I really don't believe in any kind of 7-step process or that ABC. I think with some foundational things, there are like a clear sort of process or structure. Say, in the role of, the process of even coming into a dark night of the soul, when you can understand that descent and can notice it within yourself, um, it can be experienced the same, and then there can be a very purposeful way to work with it that is kind of like step by step that you need to do. But again, it's also so unique to that individual because that individual has had their own life journey, and they've got their own previous lives of information and intelligence and experience also with them as well. So yeah, there's yeah, you're like, thank you for saying that, I guess, in a way too, because it can feel hard to want to teach in a very true and authentic way that isn't just sort of pop spirituality or yeah, I'm just not really into any of that.
Mhm.
I'm very much in how can I serve and support and empower the best, and that kind of means you've got to work with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it is a very different way of teaching because even, courses I've done on manifestation and things like that, right? Where even in manifestation, I believe it's all like super unique to us, right? And how we're going to tap into our intuition, how we hear our intuition. But a lot of it is very much like do this, this, and then this will happen. And it can be really frustrating, and
Mhm.
yeah, you have just a really unique way of teaching that really empowers the individual as opposed to the steps.
Fully, and I think even if we use like manifestation or anything like that, we have to also sort of that there is this stripping back when we come into connection with ourselves, where the things that we may have been programmed to believe that this is what's good or this is what we want, and we can even have this kind of relationship with it that would be like, yeah, I really want this kind of relationship, I really want this much money, I really want this lifestyle, because it's portrayed by those who it is really right for as also being really sexy and sort of very, very successful. And you know there can be elements of ourselves that may look at that and want that to a degree, but often they can be more of our like that programming, our conditioning, our human self. And that when we really connect with ourselves, we can discover, actually, no, that's not the kind of relationship, or that's not the kind of lifestyle that's really true for me. And that can also feel really kind of heartbreaking in some ways, because as you come to realize that or accept that about yourself, you have to let go of this kind of idealization of, how it may look. And so things that I often, or as in terms of manifestation, just sort of looking at it through that lens, things can sometimes not come into fruition, not necessarily because you're doing the processes as wrong, but because at a deeper level, potentially that is actually not a woven fabric within the expression of your intelligence or your genius, or how you're meant to, your path in this life. And yeah, there's just so many nuances that I think, that kind of, pop spirituality, or a very transactional, what do they call it, like wellness, industry, or self-help industry, hasn't, um, really explored, or properly, communicated, or just doesn't yet understand. And I think that that can be also a little damaging. And I think that's also one of the things that we're going to continue to clear away, over, the coming decades and centuries as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and that makes sense. Talking about the programming that we're in, and manifestation. It's like it's the flashy, like, ooh, get the car you want, get the job you want, get the house you want. But like breaking it down, do I really want a Lamborghini? Like, you know what I mean? Like these things, it's like not really. But I
Yeah,
think it does take like that evolution of your soul and your journey and your spiritual journey. Cause like, yeah, in the beginning of like when I wanted to manifest, I probably have my first list somewhere of the new car and the house that I want to own and this, that, and other thing. And just as it's progressed, it's like, I want freedom. You know what I
yeah,
mean? Is what it comes down to. Like, I don't need the things, and I'm learning that. I'm a Taurus, so I'd like that materialistic part of me is there. Like at some level, like I want a car that runs nicely, to get me from A to B.
yeah,
But being able to peel back the layers now and like kind of evolve a little bit, I'm like, I don't know if I could like care for all those things. I just want freedom for me and my kids, and I
that's
want to be able to travel and have a lifestyle around that.
that's right.
So,
Yeah, and even the same with relationship. I think, we've been really, sort of sold, especially, since the incoming of, television. I don't know, I feel probably really around that 50s and 60s era, especially, but obviously, different forms of it before that. But, this is what a successful relationship looks like. And, it has very clear defining factors. Um, and I don't think that those things are wrong either. But again, as a person really gets to become very intimate with their own soul energy, it may be discovered that the kind of relationship that you need looks very different, and that would so serve you, that would be such a beautiful experience for you, but is created in has an entirely different kind of structure than what is recognized, say, at the moment. Yeah, so yeah, I think it's just very nuanced.
mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah, as far as like relationships and stuff, that's something that, so I had a session with you, believe it was maybe September of last year or
Yeah.
October. It was towards the end of last year. And then I had a session with somebody else at the beginning of the year, and you had both mentioned June for me, this change in June. And I was like expecting this like explosion of like my business or something like that. Um, but it was just like this, and I say this because you mentioned relationships, and I feel like that's where I noticed like the biggest shift in my perspective is more what it felt like. Like June hit, and I think because I went through your course, and I just kind of like I went through like a microdosing phase where I just wanted to
Mhm.
like kind of connect with myself a little bit more and just kind of clear out all this other
Mhm.
stuff. And I just had this like shift in perspective, and I was like reflecting on it in July because I was like, oh yeah, like June was supposed to be this big month for me.
Mhm.
But it was like more of this like coming into my body and like understanding, yeah, like what is for me and trusting myself over anything else, even in little things. Like I fully have awareness of like my patterns in relationships. And I feel like when I begin to have feelings with somebody, I get triggered in that rejection thing and all these things that come up. Right. And then having like the awareness now to like see it, and it's not that it always makes it easier, but I'm noticing my ability to communicate it, right? Instead of just writing away or anything, like being able to communicate that and then really trusting what the other person is showing me, right? Because in the past, I was always making up stories like, oh no, well, maybe this is one off, or oh no, maybe they. So I know you had mentioned relationship. That's kind of like what came up. And it's really interesting that, I don't know.
Yeah, no. And like in regards to sort of this big month of June, let's say, this whole year, and it also goes over into next year, especially this sort of next period we're in, it's already started. That really would have started around June, but again, it's like, oh, where does time, or how do it? Where one energy always leads into the next energy. It's always preparation for the next sort of thing. So you can always keep going back. But this year, and I'm gonna say, um, yeah, next year has a different tone, and I can get into it, but really until um, next March, next April, it starts to shift next May. We're in this process of deep, um, deep reconfiguration or recalibration or reevaluation, and we're again really sold very, this is what external, like a big event looks like, or how something is going to be a massive win or a massive achievement, and it's going to, we naturally just, we think of those things, so we'll think, oh right, so around then my life's going to look like this, and then you get there and it may not. But it's all been very internal, so there's a lot of huge it's just clarification that has been going on around, for people, particular things that they've perhaps been challenged by within themselves, or have struggled with, or haven't been able to really come into acceptance of, or into love of themselves, or into that like value, or self-recognition or self-respect, where that is actually what we're doing and what we have been doing, and we can try to do that in an external way. So again, because we think that, then we think going to do all the actions and it's going to get to here, but it actually always comes off our energy. And so when we're in that internal process, or that shifting process, it might not seem like a big deal. It can be very easy for ourselves to also really overlook it, because we don't have the material gold star that says, yes, you did the thing. But no, like it's actually really massive, and without doing that kind of clarification, or the almost like also the return to valuing yourself, or things that you've never been able to properly honor within yourself, you're actually going, that I now have the strengths to be able to do that. I can now really feel that truth of myself in this. And this feels so sacred and so special. And it's my responsibility to nurture that and to take care of that. From there, then these things are built from it. And yeah, that's been a massive theme. Like, this is the year of the heart. And we can think about that in a very sentimental way, but it's a year of really deep healing and reconfiguring. And again, we're all at different phases and at different stages. So then when we see perhaps a girlfriend who's just like smashing it, and she's out there in this way and it's very noticeable, that doesn't, you're just in a different part of the process. And potentially when she's rounding out and coming back down into her underground to to compost and realize what she's just done, and to clarify further, you're now, yep, here it is. Here's that time for me. So yeah, but we're in a lot of preparation. We're in a lot of preparation, and it will compound if we're not paying attention to essentially our spirit or our deeper truth, and clarifying that for ourselves, within our energy, within our beliefs, within our, thoughts and patterns, and it will compound because and as you know, I always say I know nothing about astrology, because I really don't.
I was
I
just
know
going to
nothing
mention
about
astrology.
I know nothing about astrology, but what I do know is that, this year, especially the last couple of months and continuing, there's going to be big energies, and this goes over into next year, especially within the first, 4 or 5 months. You could even go 6 months of next year. It's big energies. So, it's we are amazing as humans. And potentially, I will also say we are amazing as women, as the feminine, for how we have been conditioned to get very comfortable with something that is damaging or harmful or destructive or painful. And we can make a lot of sacrifices or excuses or stories, and it's so much easier, especially for women, to externalize and go, I'm hurting, this isn't right for me, but this person, the partner, the friend, whoever it is clearly displaying even, and so it's actually then more comfortable for me to cover up my pain, or to diminish my pain, or to overlook it, or to, instead of tend to me, tend to them. And that will just keep compounding, keep getting hit, until, we can sometimes, unfortunately, lead ourselves into that very rock bottom, feeling very broken or feeling very disorientated within ourselves state. And that's not bad. Sometimes we need it. Sometimes that's how we learn.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also to know that we don't have to choose that as well. So it's like big preparation right up for, this year. Next year, I'm going to say again, it's really toward the end of 2024. And yeah, like if we haven't done that, if we haven't supported ourselves to grow, and grow in relationship to ourselves and in relationship to the time, or when I say time, I mean the consciousness or the greater evolving forces of Earth or of this universe. That's where we really read time from. Then we're going to feel that we're increasingly out of sync with ourselves, out of our timing, and it's going to be expressed in our life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it feels like the energy right now is really, it's calling to be seen, right? Like it doesn't want to be ignored. And I've noticed just in my own personal life, like a lot of, I don't know if you want to call them tests. I don't know how I feel about like tests from the universe, but it's just a lot of like shadowy stuff, right? Like alcohol or overeating, like these little things like that have come up. But I think because I've been so paying attention to my body, and it's like, I don't feel good doing these things. And I don't know if it's Virgo season now that I'm like really trying to like cleanse myself of all of that, because whatever the energy is, whatever's like coming, like it feels it, like I feel like I need to be in my best version of self, right? For it. And the last thing about astrology too, I know you had mentioned like all of this, all this energy like turning inwards, and every single outer planet right now is in retrograde. So we have all this massive energy that literally is turning inside of us. These things that are normally external factors in our lives are now calling to be seen within us. So it just makes so much sense that it's happening that way now. But
yeah. Yeah, it's so nice for me to put for you to put reference astrology for me. So I'm like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Yeah, it's helpful. I love it when you do that.
Hmm. Well, and you had mentioned too about like till March, and Mars goes retrograde. Well, it's in Gemini now, and it goes retrograde, I think October until March. So it's literally in like the
Mm.
same energy until March of next year, and then it moves on. So I don't know. It's just an interesting.
Well, I can like I wrote a few things down because I was reading it. I don't know if you want me to
Sure.
share.
Yeah.
And that might be around the Mars stuff.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I'm like, I want to read, but I don't. I just want to like um there's almost like this very like a cleanse, like it's very practical. There's a practicalness to it, but this can also relate to emotions or more emotional things in our life, as well as there being like more material achievements. But it's where we're going in and we're kind of getting very clear because what's being shown is what doesn't fit, what feels uncomfortable, what no longer works. And that can feel that level of discomfort, or it can be that shadow, or we can perceive it as that shadow. So we're in that kind of behavior or that habit, and it's to go, oh, I want to stop that. But even more, it's to kind of go, what's the energy that drives me, that makes me choose that thing? What am I trying to avoid by doing that? Or why do I seek that for comfort? And it's looking at what that thing is to kind of go, okay, what is the truth of this, or what doesn't work with this? Because that it's really any shadow that rises up is not a reflection of who it is that we are. It's what is wanting to be like released and to be really understood, and in that there is gold. And so it's to kind of go, oh, this is what my actual truth is here. This is what I'm trying to avoid. And as you choose to like receive that more, that can even feel pretty uncomfortable, because it's like I'm realizing that I'm not that story that compels me to eat or whatever it might be. And so there is this loss, or there's this grief process that can occur just even energetically. And it can be so easy to return to something that we've just, we've relied upon, or feels familiar. But this is happening in all areas of our life where we're being addressed. What is our truth when it comes to relationship and how we wish to express ourselves? What is the truth when it comes to our friendship, or from our lifestyle, or from how we wish to work, and how we're able to create financial structures, even that financial structures sounds so material. It's more about the exchange of how I want to experience myself and what inhibits me from doing it. It's getting very clear, and so it's a lot of internal communication or internal energy. And it feels like rebuilding. It's kind of like this rebuilding that requires almost this discipline, because it's like a new fitness you're having to develop. You're now rebuilding into something that you've not yet been, but you might have desired, but you didn't give yourself. And so you stayed comfortable in situations that basically showed you or confronted to you what your own shadow was. Um, and Yeah, as we sort of do that, oh, I was going to say communication too. There's this emphasis on communication, but that communication must be coming from that deeper truthful place. And when it is, it will feel far calmer. But when we're getting triggered, or when we're still in the story, or when we're not, like our shadow is rising up and so we're reacting from our shadow, it will come out very explosively. And you'll feel it. You'll even know in an explosive expression that you were just not in yourself. And see, again, I know nothing about human design, but I actually wanted to say, what is it that not self?
Mm-hmm.
And we'll have that kind of thing. But communication and being really clear from that very sovereign or authentic expression to be able to build and create, or to move into that next phase, that also is communication in energy. So where it's that I've said this to this person a number of times, but maybe they're not getting it, or we decided, we'll be in the dynamic again, but it continues to be the same sort of dynamic. There's not really any point into continuing to communicate. It's then, it's owning your own energy and knowing what is your truth and where you're rising to, and being able to move without, or not engage with that thing. And again, that doesn't mean like ignoring necessarily or blocking someone out. It's staying in your power, and honoring that part of ourselves. And this goes through right. I think we'll probably start to feel a slight reprieve maybe by the end of February, maybe starting to go through March, but it'll be really dependent. The upswing of energy starts to come a little bit more in April, slowly, almost like we feel a bit of a reprieve, or like, oh, okay, almost like, there's a we've done the hard yards. We've just worked a really hard day in the yard. I don't know, digging trenches or something big. and um, and then April, May also starts to feel a bit punchy, and even perhaps towards the end of May, this feels very like revolutionary. This feels very much like, whether that's revolutionary within ourselves, or even at a more collective level, like at a global sort of level. I think that there will be this, from all that hard work, it will be, I can see stuff that I couldn't see clearly when I was here. I can see that really clearly now, and no, that's not where I'm going. That's not what I want to participate in, or that's not right. I may feel compelled to represent that, or at a collective level there may be that pushback depending on what happens, globally. But it feels very much, an experience of like that revolutionary power, and that further charges us from the framework that we had been creating. And then as I go through, May, June, there's an entirely sort of different energy again that will start to come in July. It feels far softer and far more, I don't know, I guess magical, and probably really much further integrating and being more fluid in the new sort of level that we've reached. It's like the hard work has been done. When you do something and you can't fully appreciate perhaps what you've just created, or what you've built, or what you've put the hard work in, but let's say, you start sitting in the afternoon gazing at whatever your hard work was days and weeks later, or it starts to thrive and you start to have that deep appreciation. I get it now, and it's far more integrated now. Yeah, that sort of, it starts to feel a little softer by, definitely sort of June, July. And then I kind of didn't get any further, or I probably reach about September, and then I sort of, stopped tuning in, to next year, also because it feels like, at least for me when I'm reading it, that there's just so much to do, like banked up energy, or energy we've got to really like wade through over the next, from now to the end of March, that, as a part where I'm like, I don't know how that will also change things by the end of next year. If I'm to read more collective energy. Yeah, because there's always that, I guess, timeline for us all, depending on what we all, or where we're all at, how we're going to interact with ourselves, that contributes to then,
And as far as like, so we have like all this energy coming, all this, what all this that we're working towards, right? This healing to like grow. And I guess a question too is like, what is your opinion, or I don't know if opinion is the right word, but if we like look at the ego, right? Because I think, the ego, it just feels like it's always trying to like stop us every step of the way, right? And
Mm.
from like this higher level like question, I guess, it feels like I almost sometimes feel bad for the ego just because it's like the ego only ever knows rejection, right? So that's what it's like projecting on us, if that makes any sense. And
Mm.
so, like, what is your opinion? Like, what is the ego for?
Mm.
Like in
Yeah,
the big picture of things, right? Like,
I have a bit of a different, or I'm developing a bit of a different understanding. I think I've probably always had a bit of a different understanding of ego personally. Um, that has been also hard to make sense of because
mm,
a lot of, again, that sort of pop psychology and pop spirituality and even just psychology in that itself has really rained on ego. And I I have never felt that that's been actually correct or accurate. I think that it is one half of the side to two sides of potentially ego.
mm,
So we developed ego, or the I, in Atlantis. And that was this descension phase of coming into material expression. So um, in Lumeria, or in Mu, we developed our astral body, and in a previous expression of Earth, that was called Sun. But it wasn't the sun as we know it. We can think instantly to go to sun, but basically, there's, if you think of a fetus growing, a baby, it goes through all these different forms before it looks, like it does. And just as a child is born, a baby goes through, but it's the same thing. So in then the phase that is called sort of sun, or is called sun, has been deemed sun, was the etheric template. um yeah, there's a lot of information, or a lot of, like, I'm saying this really
mm,
simply. So we've got etheric, and then we've got our astral, and then in Atlantis we've got our eye. So in Lemuria, and in a good portion of Atlantis, we were all very um connected. We did sort of have this one thought, or we moved like starlings, let's say, or we moved like a school of fish. So there is this individuation, definitely, but there was always this like real deep connection to the collective, or to the group mind, and to then that being also who I am. And as we continue to come into materialization, or into form, and Atlantis was a very, very powerful period of evolution, we also started to get the I. So we started to feel more separate from each other. And then, you where we can start to see more of what maybe we understand as ego being negative. That's like a totally new thing. So let's imagine if we're always just hooked together, which is really probably quite hard to imagine. I find it quite hard to imagine, um because we're all sort of feeling the same sorts of things, kind of thing, and we're starting to separate from that. And there would be a level of fear that would come with that, but there would also be this level of like, I can have this power, or I can really assert my expression, and I can really lead in this particular kind of way. And those things, again, aren't bad. It's about then what the motivation's for. And this is where we're getting more of our spiritual sovereignty. So it's only actually through the I that we can make choices that are either going to be for our spiritual growth, for our spiritual sovereignty. So here is me. I can feel there's this shadow. I can continue to play around in it and tell stories about it, or make excuses, or settle that, or I can access that truth of me that will feel very resonant, very deep, sometimes uncomfortable, sometimes hard to accept, in both positive and negative. And I can then choose how I'm going to use my I, or use my ego, to either support that really soul expression of myself into creation. And it will be either a positive expression, or it will be like a sort of negative one, where we're not using our power, that is in a sort of evolutionary force forward. We're using our power to have power over someone else or to control, or um, it's not really growing us. Um, I also see ego as, like personality, and in a more like condensed or materialized version of our soul. So my ego is also really beautiful as much as it can also have its stuff. It is a reflection of my soul at an even more reduced level. Um, and, our soul, we're working through a bunch of, like going through our own development phases. And so each person's soul contains so much light and so much wisdom, so much power, so much intelligence, as well as each person's soul is still processing things that are challenging, and that are rigid, or that are, have a level of darkness around it, and that can and comes out in our ego too. So um I try to keep the balance in regards to ego, or in relationship to my ego, because it's a very vital, um, vehicle for how we evolve ourselves. It's very important and it's a gift. We just have to learn how to use it correctly. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it's something I've been trying to just understand because, when it relates to emotions, I know like the mind and the ego can get really loud and it can be this like big loop of things. Then my emotions become so big. And what's been
Mm.
helpful is just having awareness of the stories it's telling me and labeling it as stories as opposed to being truth has been so helpful. But then, we talk about the ego separating us from the whole. But then if we're taking the ego out of us, we're still being separate, right? So it's like we're all like love. If we're all love, we should be embracing the ego as well. So it's just like this thing I've been trying to understand, like where it plays a role. But yeah, that makes sense. And then, we talk about emotions and like Lumeria and stuff being more part of this collective, like the school of fish. I love that analogy. Everybody just kind of moves as one. Like I've noticed my emotions sometimes feel more when there's like nothing going on and I just feel this like deep sadness or this deep something. I'm starting to realize that's more of like the collective energy, right? And like pulling that in. So it's like in a sense, like our emotions kind of allow us to tap into that oneness, but because we're so separated from it, we take it to mean something else, right? we
Mhm.
we attach it to a person or a thing or an event, the past, the present or the future, like whatever it is, right? And we just kind of like run with that as opposed to just like releasing.
Or we think we're broken. It,
Exactly.
it must be.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's really interesting to see that. I would love for you to speak a little bit more on. So I know, like, everything goes in cycles and life goes in cycles, universal cycles, and, whatever. And so, like, as we're moving forward, and I know we spoke to this in your program, the Reconnect and Recode, just like the cyclical nature of life and kind of like what we're moving towards.
Mm.
And, it seems like from, what we talked about, like Lumeria and Atlantis are a huge part of what we're experiencing right now, right?
Mm. Yeah. So we're still probably, not even probably, we're still consolidating a lot of the things that, we developed and we learned. And we're still healing in many ways from particular experiences that were had. And that's really deep in our sort of psyche and in our unconscious, or in our collective unconscious. And it's why, we can say feel like sometimes this deep and unexplainable like loss, let's say, or deep yearning to return to a time when there was far more connectivity. And yet we can think, oh, why would I feel like that? Or where is that from? And it's so much in our collective psyche as we've sort of descended down. There has been this sort of separation, but it's very, it's an important part of the process as well. Um, oh, it's almost like you're giving me a big topic. Where do I start? um, I think there is this return and rise of feminine energy in a way that is, again, hard to explain. I think it's much greater than even how it's spoken about again on social media, divine feminine. And we're so programmed to just go into our head. And when we have images of, what divine feminine looks like, that's sort of how we're at the level of understanding things. But it's so much deeper. And there is this return of let's say mother, or the return of feminine wisdom, which also includes the embracing of intuition and understanding, like regenerative, cooperative, communities and cycles. um, it's a redistribution of power and energy, and it is, really, from a feminine perspective, it is the complete restructuring of, um, really pretty much all of our systems. And this is something that's going to take a really long time to move into, because we also require the masculine energy to be able to hold form, for that. And so there are distinct roles, distinct purposes. Like the feminine expression has very clear gifts and intelligence and power that the masculine doesn't have. And the masculine expression has very clear purposes and skills and gifts that the feminine does not have. And until we can, really work that out for ourselves, which is quite a process. This isn't something that we're going to be able to do in a lifetime. This is over a number of lifetimes, because it's individually and collectively, that we will also be able to begin to form structures that will be reflective of masculine and feminine energy working more harmoniously. But we've also got other big themes, through Atlantis. Atlantis is, especially sort of right now, we're really entering into a period of time which it's going to last quite a while, in all honesty. When I say quite a while, I'm talking hundreds of years. But there'll be you know, more challenging decades and periods of time when this is going to be quite big. And it's around technology. So we're actually, we have this incredible fascination and with technology, and I think technology is great. And when I say technology, I also mean really advanced technology, be that for healing or medicine, be that even for transportation, and even like space, or even time travel, even like uh, all sorts of different things. We're going to see mass innovations for technology. And a lot of this is also like hangovers of Atlantis. We're remembering and reconnecting back into, because through the Atlantean phase, we had incredible technology. And it was also a different era, like a different, Earth felt different, looked different, had a different quality about it. So the technology that was developed then, it will be developed differently. So it's like a mimic, or but and in many ways it's very empowering, and it helps us to remember our greatness. It will help us to remember our greatness. But there's also a problem too, because both in Atlantis, technology then was used very destructively, as the I came in, and as the distinction between how we use that and sort of power, and as we sort of came more down into our humanness. And this is where like transhumanism has been a thing. It was a thing in Atlantis, and the creation of like genetic engineering, beings, literal beings that were then essentially enslaved or used in different ways. Technology, like it became quite, an issue. And we're also seeing, and I'm going to see that again as well, or we need to be mindful of what it is. And I think we don't quite yet, like as a collective, we're not as, we've been really spiritually undernourished and uneducated in a very grounded and truthful or real way. So we've got advanced technology, even the use of our phones, and we aren't yet fully understanding that we're entering into portals through them, and that we are, our own, my own personal consciousness as I enter into that portal is in training with whatever consciousness is that tuning to. And we don't yet understand that even different types of lower astral entities, as we're opening ourselves into a kind of portal through technology, we can, open ourselves to particular types of entities and things like that too. So as a really small example, I don't think we've yet properly understood what technology is, because we have not yet properly understood how to work, or who we are in many ways. And I think really in this period of time that we're increasingly moving into is the remembrance and the initiation of coming back into our true nature and into nature with Gaia, and that Gaia herself, like that's really of this time. So the more that we connect with ourselves, the more that we are able to connect with Gaia, the more that we understand the interconnectedness of that, and the more then we are able to build supportive structures that are healthy and reflective of who we are and what our needs are. But for as long as we continue to try to dominate or come up with like solutions, food crisis solutions, like food crisis isn't actually a thing, people. We're making it a thing. When we're doing all of this synthetic engineering, when we are, you know, putting implants in ourselves, or different stuff that's going to come about, we're missing the point. We're not actually initiating ourselves into our own capacities and capabilities as divine spiritual beings, and the powers that we have, like the intelligence, the technology, our form, our field as a technology. And so then we're going to be falling more behind, because Gaia, in relationship to the evolving universe, is putting in an impulse through us that says, here is the consciousness for this time. This is the lesson. This is what you're learning. This is how you are to evolve through this period of time. And if we are unable to step into that, then we're going to be, as a collective, behind time, if that makes sense. We're going to be at a further deficit. And that's going to be hard. That's not something that we want. But I also don't believe, I don't see it as doom or gloom. It's not this big, like, I think spirituality is really filled with that, like, scare tactic kind of thing. So anyway, that was a big chat.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. I have so many questions. I like when you talk about technology now versus like technology in Atlantis, what does that look like between the differences?
Ooh.
Like, is there maybe like an example? Because of course, like I think technology and I think like metal, hardware, things like that. And I know that's not necessarily exactly what it looked like then.
Yeah, so there's different things that I've sort of seen. So firstly, we utilized far more utilized energy in entirely different ways. So firstly, we ourselves had a different kind of form, if that makes sense. We could harness our own energy a little more, or harness life force energy a little more. So then we could utilize life force energy from other living things as well, in a harmonious way or in a destructive way. So that could be from nature, plants itself, water, ether, those sorts of things. The earth was in a slightly different kind of state as well, but a lot of the technology was in utilization of like say frequency, or of the different atmospheric forces for like compulsion or propulsion, but that was also linked to our body. So we had to know how to use our energy system. So even like when we think about how we drive a car, we're doing it very physically, right? But there was technology in Atlantis where, we're not sitting behind just a steering wheel necessarily. We're actually using our energy field to be able to move the vehicle. And there was a lot of propulsion. Like it was very sucking in energy. If we're talking about more like vehicles and sorts of things, there are things. Sound was a big thing. Sound. So there was a lot of crystal structures or different kinds of ways of transmitting frequency. So we can look at again our phones and go, oh look, this is what the current trend or the current belief, or this is what we're processing as consciousness as a collective. We can go see that on social media, going through big waves, or through the media in general. And really in Atlantis there was crystal structures, kind of like you could, like frequency posts that were transmitting harmonics or vibrational waves that were of a certain quality of resonance that would allow ourselves to be able to stabilize or access ourselves. There was a lot of genetic engineering, and that became quite sort of dark. But yeah, that became quite sort of dark. There was a lot of testing, manipulation, and often linked to again a level of like mysticism. So at Atlantis too, there was still a very strong relationship with the universe, or with dimensional realms, and with other planetary systems. And that was just sort of norm. There was this awareness of collective consciousness. We were in layers of ourselves. And so there were particular, you could say, priesthoods, or temple culture, or occult or esoteric pathways that people would choose, that was working with technology that was to do with energy and portals, but also having that linked into genetic engineering, or being able to access different states. Yeah, right. It's sound and vibration were a very big thing. Sound and vibration, that was far more understood. And it was also understood too because we were able to use more of our energy system in a conscious way. And so then we're very interlinked with, then, let's say, moving a big object, a massive object, through sound and vibration. There are technologies that can be used, often again more crystalline technologies, but it was very much in direct relationship to us as well, or great masters or great teachers and great adepts who have studied. And government itself, government of that time, and spirituality, it was all interwoven, just as it is now. It's just that it's not spoken about. Behind um a lot of the leaders and particular forward appearing, let's say, political parties or agendas and things like that, there is a cult uh, understanding, just because they're not openly talking about why they're doing things on particular days. Um, it will pretty much almost always have a um, esoteric or occult or a mystical aspect to it, a spiritual aspect to it. And these are things that we will slowly come to realize and understand. And we've probably already seen the very beginnings of that through the COVID experience, where people, are starting to question motives, or to be able to see symbolism a little more easier, to be able to start pairing. Oh, hang on, this is interesting. Here is, I can see more occult symbolism, which is important to understand symbolism itself, to then also link it to, what's the agenda here? I don't know if that answered your
Yeah,
question.
no, it feels like my question, I guess. So I was gonna say it feels like we've been very much disconnected from that spiritual like Gaia part of it, but it could just be my own personal reality. It had never seen that, or the collective reality, maybe majority reality has never seen it. It's been kind of underneath. And when you mentioned like the crystals, I kind of think of like these 5G towers that are connecting our phones. And then it was just like crystals connecting like our energy, right? Like in kind of like a sense, like we were using ourselves or the energy that we had, right, to do things, as opposed to this like outside source that was like going through phones. But it's interesting. I know, and you had mentioned portals, and I don't know, I don't watch the news, like I don't, but every now and again something on Instagram will pop up or whatever. And I don't know the name of anyone who was part of this, but I had read something about like someone was like smashing particles together to try to open portals now. I don't remember where it was or anything like that.
CERN. That's CERN.
Yes. Yeah. And I didn't like really do much digging. I just like kind of like read it and I was like, that's interesting, and kind of moved on, but it had popped up a couple times. But things like that, when you talk about Atlantis and kind of like the experimentation that they had done and things like that, it kind of, that's what kind of came up to me as you're talking about that. So how can we, because I do feel that connection with Gaia is really powerful right now. It feels like it's really calling. So how do you see, or is there a possibility to really tap into that and have that kind of feminine energy mixed with, the masculine, with that Atlantis like technology? Because, in our culture now, we do have this certain level of technology. So it's like, is there a way that we can kind of like mold the two going forward, as opposed to just like one massively taking over?
Yeah. And I could say it probably really simplistic, which is also sort of really annoying. It in coming back into connection with ourselves. So, there are real deep layers to this, really deep layers to this. Most people, and even if, I think an individual does have a connection, like most people don't know what their natural own unique rhythm and beat is. They don't know it. That's always been ascertained. Here we train a baby to sleep, or, we haven't even had an opportunity to really discover our own unique like rhythm. And that's going to be different for each person. And then that rhythm is not consistent all the time throughout the course of your life. It does, change and take you through different phases of your own evolution, but you will have a unique rhythm and beat. And yeah, that's defined for us through school, through work, um, you know, and sort of celebrated through, this is the success that you can have, or we're fitting into a different kind of time. So there's a lot of decolonization that I think has to occur and is occurring. And again, it's been happening long before COVID, but the COVID experience where people, had to work from home or had to develop a new rhythm or lost their job. And it can feel very scary going into that kind of abyss. But if they were able to work with themselves through it, then there is this discovery of, I've got this different impulse, and this is actually how I work best. And when I work with my impulse in this kind of way, it's far more like, it can create more balance. So balance within myself, balance within my emotions and my mind, my mental body. I'm going to have a different relationship with my physical body. And so then that starts to harmonize more of our life, or the dynamics in our life, which then releases and allows us to connect again with nature more as well. So we can notice, working from sunrise to sunset to come home, to crazily do dinner, kids, what have you. And there's not seeming even any space, or it seems like it's a luxury to be able to stop or to sit and watch a sunset, or these little things that we try to fit in, and not making any of that wrong. That's also about where we're at in this time. And there's just a reality to a degree of what that is. But it's to start to notice actually being in harmony or in appreciation and in deeper connection with Gaia, with the sunrise and with the sunset and with the seasons and in nature. That feels like more of my natural state. And when I'm in that natural state, I have more access to myself. Therefore, I can access more of my own genius or more of my own intelligence. And then we become far more like cooperative with each other, or want to become more cooperative with nature. In that, there's also going to be a lot more self-responsibility, because for us to really come further into harmony with Gaia is, it's another decolonization process. It's going to take a long time, but we're going to start to realize we don't actually want or need as much as what we've been sold or what we've been told, or through this era and development of ourselves. And so that's going to also relieve us, and it's going to mean that we can tend our time in being in nature, or growing our food, trading our food, these sorts of things. And it sounds now like I'm describing something that is very like village or tribal, or sounds like it's going back. We will be able to do this in a very like modern way as well, but it's a restructuring of the community. And in terms of, I'm calling it like the Gaia impulse, and I actually believe that this is very much linked to our astrology and to the planets and all these other things. But as we come into our own energy, we start to familiarize with that, and really using Gaia as a wonderful like portal. Ultimately, if you can go out in nature, even if it's just your backyard, or if there's a space that you like to go to, and allow yourself to soften and come into your own energy, her frequency is going to be flowing into you, and it's going to activate you uniquely to you. And that's, I believe, really in conjunction with, say, your birth chart, or your astrological chart, which is like your own template. And then how the planets, because Gaia, she's alive, she's mother, she's guardian, she, protects or takes us through passage, and she's in direct relationship to moon, and the moon is transducer of all other planets as well. So that, and not just the soul, we also, as in soul transducer or communicator, but there's this incredible, it's organic, highly alive, but like an incredible kind of system that is beaming particular frequencies that also supports Gaia in her evolution. And then as we are able to soften more and more into ourselves and really just feel that kind of like impulse, but for some people, they might experience it as an impulse, literally, usually coming in through the base, but not always. It's more just this opening of the field and softening, and you can access yourself and you can start to go, right, how am I being activated right now? What is my impulse? How is Gaia cueing me? Where am I to place my focus? Where am I to tend to myself? And this can be very sort of, small steps, directly related to our internal self or our life, but it can also be far more significant pivots and shifts that I've seen a lot of over the last 2 years, where especially within professional fields, where individuals have really awakened, felt the hit of the Gaia impulse, and have walked away from, professions where they were developed a level of success, to now realize I'm being deeply cued to basically learn an entire new way to live, an entire new structure. And it feels very thrilling, exciting, but probably a little bit daunting. And they're going to be the new leaders and the new creators of these going to be emerging pathways that will have to do with our education, politics, birth, healing, governmental structures, like in all sorts of different lines. But it's coming from an impulse that is coming through Earth, unique to then how it activates them and what their skills, their strengths, their intelligence is. And they'll be compelled to start to harmonize with that more and start to really leave that legacy. That's really what it is. These are people who are getting activated for our future, because and setting that up as a structure for then, our children, our grandchildren, our great grandchildren to be able to benefit from. So yeah, it's exciting. Again, it's probably a lot of information there.
I love it. Do you feel like, so you talk about these like impulses from like Gaia, and do do you think that you could feel that? So like kind of to like two things. I My personal experience, I've been feeling almost like an actual physical like vibration or like tingling in like my feet or like kind of like my energy. Would that be more something maybe from that impulse from Gaia, or is that more just like my sensitivity now to like technology that's like so much around us, or like both?
Well, I want to turn it to you. So I want you to tune into that right now and read that for
Yeah.
me. No, I want you to do it right now. I'm very bossy.
Oh, I don't know. I just got nervous.
So tune
Yeah.
into when I'm feeling that, is that technology and me feeling sensitive to that? And you'll feel a resonance, yes or no. And then you'll go, oh, I'm thinking of that occasion when it was happening. Was that Gaia? Was that impulse?
Mm. I mean, like it's happening now. It's been kind of like tonight I've been feeling it, which is what kind of why, because I was sitting there earlier thinking about it. And I was
Mm.
like, well, that's interesting because I felt it like off and on. It just like to me, I guess yeah, it just feels like a more of a sensitivity in my body picking up vibration.
Yeah.
I beyond that, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I feel that
What
like
What's the quality of the vibration? So does it feel like a level of an like energizing or expansiveness, or like a higher quality of light?
Mhm.
That also doesn't mean that it's not going to feel a bit like,
Mhm.
oh, because I know that there's growth happening,
Yeah.
but or
It
is it?
feels soft. Like it's just kind of like
Mhm,
more like a tingling maybe than like
mhm,
a harsh
mhm,
vibration.
mhm. Yeah, so that's, I very much, I could say that's Gaia Impulse, or Gaia Impulse working through you. And then it's really about, how is that activating my thought or my consciousness, or how is that working within my system that is going, okay, this is where I'm needing to turn towards, and this is what I'm really wanting to invest in, or here is where I can feel some kind of shift in myself, that's linked to participate in new streams of consciousness, or a new pathways that are to be created or developed.
Mhm.
It's, yeah, it will be, and it's also such a journey. Like, that's the other thing. I mean, intuition or spirituality, it's so vital for us to get our heads wrapped around it, like really important. But at the same time, it's not clear cut. Um, it's we have to be able to stay within a level of unknown and be okay with that. So I can feel that activation. You can feel it. What is this about? And instead, it's like you've got to go, okay, I don't quite know yet, but I'm aware of it. I'm going to keep working with it. I'm going to stay with the unknown and see where that takes me.
Mhm.
Um, yeah.
Mhm. Well, I think like I know in my own journey, discerning between what feels aligned and what doesn't feel aligned has been really powerful just in like my body, right? Like knowing if there's a tightness in my chest or if my emotions are becoming overwhelmed, or my mind's taken away with things. It's like, okay, maybe those things aren't for me as much as I may want them to be, right? And
Mhm.
then just coming back to that space where I feel at ease,
Mhm.
because I think whether it's from experiences in this life or past lives, we have like this internal or subconscious conditioning that we think, we have to like
Mhm.
make things work when they don't, right? From our own like triggers and trauma. For me, I know that's a big thing is really recognizing like just because it feels unsafe doesn't make it safe, right? Because that's my thing, right? The unsafety feels normal, right? It
Mhm.
feels comfortable, but
Right.
it doesn't have to be.
Yeah.
So I'm like
That's
really rewriting that.
Yeah, yeah, that's I mean, you would know lots about this because there's a lot of hormones and chemicals that are linked to that feeling of being unsafe and that kind of that we can be very addicted to or can rely on, and then without it, it can feel very unsafe to not have that. And I often go again to the energy of something as well, obviously just because of what I do, I guess, is how I work best. But yeah, we can have like our energy, our system is always processing energy, always flowing a particular type of energy that actually also informs, and creates chemicals and hormones and different things in our body. Um, and yeah, we can some it can feel very scary to even get to that point of recognizing this isn't right for me. I know that this isn't healthy. This is that trauma response, but it feels really scary because I don't know what is now right for me or how that would even feel. Um, and It's like acclimatization. I know that's how it feels like to me, is that I have to slowly start to acclimatize and begin to learn and develop what that new energy of health, in reflection to that higher truth or discovery of myself is. I certainly can't just oh jump to that new thing. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
When you have this like beautiful, deep, expansive like insight into, we were talking about something you said triggered this, but you were talking about like the feminine, right? The divine feminine and things like that. And I'm I always like, I guess I kind of like relate it to just like maybe more of like our 3D. But
Mhm,
even like in that talking about, kind of like relearning ourselves as the feminine and like kind of like I just like birth control, right?
mhm,
Like I got off birth control in February and I feel like a different human being. And you don't realize how much we're
mhm,
outsourcing ourselves or giving so much of ourselves away to,
mhm,
yes, the programming that we're taught. Oh, you're a
mhm.
teenager, you have acne, go on birth control. Or you don't want to get pregnant, go on birth control. And it's like I was on birth control for 20 years and never
Wow.
never thought about it, right? And then I got off of it and I was just like I was so disconnected from my physical body
Mhm,
because it literally like wasn't mine, right? It was just I had all these hormones going through it and it didn't make sense and I didn't understand. I could not
mhm,
connect with it. And
mhm,
once I got off that, like I felt so many shifts and
mhm,
just being able to understand just that feeling inside of me of this is for me and this is not for me. This is
mhm,
what my body feels good with. This is what makes it, I want to
mhm,
steer away from. And I
mhm,
never had a grasp on that before I
mhm.
gave up just that simple thing, right?
That's
And
Yeah, we've got to. That's what we need to teach. Uh,
mhm,
as it's children. That's part of the change. That's part of the Gaia shift. That's part of the Gaia impulse. That's part of coming back to our true nature, and then restructuring, and that includes ourselves as sort of parents, and as then the like leading or guides or ancestors of the time, but filtering it all down. because until we can really know how it feels within ourselves at a solid degree to be who it is that we are, to understand, I don't know about you. I had a different experience with birth control. I only went on it for 6 months when I
Mhm.
was 18, just before 18, 3 months before I was 18, 3 months after. And I just was like, this isn't right for me. Um, I can tell this isn't right for my body. It's doing things within my body physically. I can't access my emotions. I can't access my intuition clearly. I can't clearly decide or define who it is that I am. But as soon as I started to take that medication, and that scared the living crap out of my whole family.
Mm. Yeah. I think I was like so disconnected from myself to begin with because gosh, when I went on birth control, I was like drinking and I wasn't eating right, even at that young age, right? Because so when I went on it, but even like when I started, my body like did not react kindly to it. I went through like four different types to find out what was good for me. Like I would bleed heavily or I'd feel nauseous or I had headaches. And so I went through like a cycle of them. And then I don't know if my body just gave up and was like, all right, we're on this ride. Let's just
Yeah,
roll with it. I got used to it, you know?
yeah,
I don't know. But yeah, it's just like incredible the difference
yeah.
now.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't think that that's also something that you should, like, I don't know if you do, but feel bad about. Like,
Mm,
it's like, yeah, I think it's always so purposeful. Whatever kind of journey that we
yeah.
take is always really on point. But I remember thinking those things. I stopped having my period um probably from when I was 19 or 20. It was slowly reduced until I was about 23. No, that's a lie. From sort of 19 to about 22-ish. And I went to see all these specialists and had all these tests, and they couldn't, endocrinologist and different doctors, different internal examinations, and they couldn't find anything wrong. And so their solution was go on the pill that'll
Mm.
bring your period back. And I remember just being like, I said, I'm sorry. I don't know if that's a solution. That's not my body actually doing what it's meant to do then. That's something instructing my body to do something. And I don't, that doesn't sound like health to me.
Mm.
Of course, I didn't really like that very much, but I was just like, no, there was something in it that didn't feel correct or didn't feel right. But um like we're all moving to that place of like getting it now really far more clearly, and we're going to see a huge revolution in all of that, and then therefore that rise in feminine, that intelligence back coming through in feminine, because we're actually able to function and reach and be in communion with all these different layers of ourselves without all these barriers. Yeah.
Yeah, our intuition is so powerful. And even just from that health perspective, like I studied, alternative or holistic health because I felt like there was so much more beyond what like the medical system is giving us. And now I'm kind of studying Eastern medicine because that's fascinating in itself. But it's like really trusting yourself. I had a friend who had a miscarriage, and I
Mm,
remember she called me and she was like, something doesn't feel right. But it was like a
mm,
weekend. And I don't know if it was COVID. It might have been. But the doctors were like, it's fine, just wait till your next appointment, it's fine. And I was like, I mean, if you feel something, like trust yourself.
yeah.
And she ended up getting in, and she was having a miscarriage, but they told her you're fine and to wait because she was emotional, right? And so you see an emotional pregnant woman and you're just like, oh, just calm down and go home and get some rest and you're fine. But it's like, no, your body's like really telling you something.
Uh,
And again, yeah, we're slapped with birth control pills and medications and antidepressants, and not that any of those is wrong. And like you said, like my journey was to go through 20 years of birth control to come to the point where I was ready to get off of it and come to myself. But
yeah, and sometimes they're supportive for periods of time. It's like
mm,
antidepressants or things like that. Like,
mhm,
I don't think that it's about how we use them and where we're going to place our power. And sometimes in periods where it's something that is supportive to allow us to address or stabilize or do other things. It's then more, do we have the ability, do we have the spiritual connection with ourselves to be able to recognize, okay, I'm now at a point to be able to review that thing, because I hold more power within myself than what that thing is or does. And again, that's so unique to a person's journey, but yeah, it's so foundational for especially parents or especially guardians, in any of those roles, any opportunity that we have, that even like with your friend, to assist another person to be in connection or to voice or to um, express what they're sensing at a deeper level without diminishing it or making it wrong, or um, that's so powerful. And we're enabling that person then to build on that strengths, to use it more and more in their life, like, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's important to question things, right? Like, if, just in that, like, if your intuition is telling you something, just trust it and flow with it. And you know what I mean? Like, listen to it and ask the questions, because I don't know, it's just really powerful.
So powerful. We have to be spiritually strong enough to be able to question things, especially again, continuing to go forward, or we can use COVID as an example too. When we are spiritually weak or energetically weak, which is, we don't have that deep connection or life force energy, and our spirit isn't really, cultivated and active within us. And that doesn't mean you have to meditate every day or whatever. It's so personal. But when that's really spiritually weak, we have to hang on to whatever is external, and we're very defensive, and it feels very scary to question something. And it's not ultimately progressive or productive. But when we are, as a society, increasingly spiritually weak, then we will be able to have better conversations, that we can feel our own truth or in connection to that, whilst also being able to review or question without it going down into this sort of demise of segregation and separation and division. That's really, can reveal how spiritually weak we are as a society,
Mm-hmm.
because you can have a belief and I can differ from that. And you can know you're so purely and so true for you that it really won't matter what I say. And if I can also be the same, then we can enter into this beautiful conversation and discussion, and maybe reach a new understanding or a new height from that, or not. But we're neither affected then,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And that's, I think, so much of what's missing right now too, right? Nobody really truly listens. But I don't know, I, like, kind of a tangent, but I got COVID in, I think it was January or February. And like, yes, I was exhausted and I was tired, and I like sat at home and I rested for 5 days. But it was really interesting because I almost felt like an activation, right? And I have society everywhere telling us that this is like terrible and this, that, and the other thing. And it was just weird. I felt like spiritually lit up, right? Like something turned on,
Yeah.
and I felt like, and I was like, I needed the rest, because I was working 2 jobs and the
Yeah.
podcasts and all that stuff. So I got 5 days to just read and rest.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, I felt like my spirituality deepened in an intense way. And I didn't know what to make of that. Right. Cause I was just like, everything is telling me I should be feeling the opposite, or I should be afraid, or I should be feeling XYZ. And I was like,
I feel pretty good, actually.
you what?
You were like, I feel pretty
Yeah.
good.
I was confused because I was like, this is,
Yeah.
so I just kind of, for me personally, that's what it did for me. I felt an
Yeah.
activation during that. And I didn't expect that. And it was kind of confusing, but I was like, all right, I'm just going to go with this.
Yeah.
It's kind of like changed since then. And I just see it in a different way. And,
Yeah.
but I think it's all the energy that we bring to it, right? Because we're so conditioned that we need to be fearful. And again, I don't watch the news. I don't look at the numbers, none of that, because
I have,
I have to
mm,
live my life. You know what I mean? And I can't be affected by those things.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah, you're
but
just not resonant with that energy on that consciousness
mhm,
anymore. Yeah.
yeah. So I don't know. It helps me. I mean, people talk about things at work, and I'm just like, no idea what you're talking about. Like,
Yeah.
but I'm fine with that, you
Yeah.
know? Like
Yeah.
keeps me on my space. But I want to just like cycle back to something really quick from the beginning because I had wanted to mention it or ask you questions. You know, I know like we've talked a lot about God, like so much. Like this conversation is so amazing. But like something beginning, like we kind of started talking about like the dark night of the soul and like that shadow space and things like that. And I know we all have a personal evolution in our journey and we have to like experience that in some way, but at like how much, and I know it's all individual, I feel like I know what your answer is going to be, but I'm going to ask it anyway. How much of that do you feel like is necessary like in the shadow work? Because again, you know, some people are like, I don't subscribe to the shadows and this, that, and the other thing. And I personally, I enjoy the shadow because it shows me where I'm in misalignment, right? It shows me where I can have awareness of like, oh, I'm going down this path as opposed to this path. But at what point it's like, do you kind of push the shadow aside and kind of step more into just this like assuming that the shadow is bringing us into a lower vibration, you know?
Okay. So I feel like you're maybe even talking about two things here.
Mm,
So a dark night of the soul is almost like an entirely different process. Yes, there's a shadow component to it, but that's very different to than shadow work or recognizing shadow, let's say. Um, so, firstly, where we are at in this era of Earth, it's very much we're consolidating. So, you know, when you look at um, you know the yugas, or when you look at you know we're coming down, so it's like the great procession, we're coming down, and right now we're really sort of just at the bottom. We've passed the sort of deep darker halfway, but we're still really in, you know, at the bottom of consolidating everything that has come and been. And so there's been a lot of light, a lot of evolution, amazing. So many of the rays, you know, like we've got all these um, teachers that have come from, you know, Buddha to Christ, and so many different masters. There's like just the level of spirituality that's here or is in, and then we've got all this darkness too, and we're processing and consolidating all of that. So we're at this kind of reckoning phase. So right now, why there is so much, you know, talk and exploration of the shadow is because when we're becoming more aware of it, we're becoming more conscious of it, we're wanting to take more self-responsibility for it, and we're recognizing that we have so much more capacity, we have so much, we can feel our divineness, and we're being called to that. And I mean that in a very true way, because if you're going, I want to be a better person, or buying into some bullshit, if I'm allowed to swear, like, you know, thing, then you're again doing it out of a fear, which is essentially like, or a scarcity. But where it's like where you can literally feel who it is that you are, and you know, then that light, that rising in you will also raise the shadow and the things that are ready to be integrated and processed. So I think depending on the person's journey, who they are, who they come into in this lifetime, all of that very much varies, and around how much shadow they've got. And then there's periods of time, often when we're really waking up or really becoming aware, that we're starting to go, oh crap, I've got a bit to process. And it can be quite heavy going in terms of that shadow work. But once that there is this sort of, there's like, you know, you've established or cleansed away a fair bit of that, it shouldn't be about just, I've got to keep on the shadow treadmill. Sorry. I've got to keep on the shadow treadmill. It's now that you feel this, okay, cool. I can feel and sense, and I'm aware of when shadow is arising up, but I don't like have to like always be on that treadmill of it. It's enjoyment as well, and sort of creating the balance and being really present in life. I think that's a big thing that we've had this huge, self-help wellness phase, and um it's been purposeful, but also it's done. It's done in so many ways. It's done, I suppose, in the way that it's been done, um, because it's around really becoming more present. Ultimately, if you've done a lot of that stuff, it's not to keep churning out the same sort of thing. um, and so that when you get some shadow comes up or gets really triggered, or as you move into the next phase or level of yourself, basically every time you level up in light or reach the next phase of yourself, you'll also start to become aware again of your shadow, and it will also often be a spiral. So you'll think, oh, I thought I dealt with this, I thought I cleansed that away, but because you've reached a new level and layer of yourself, you realize, it's the same thing but different, and it possibly won't be as intense as what it was when you were first addressing it, but there will be another level of reworking it at that phase. And a dark night of the soul is really where you're going into um, it's a deep kind of purification. It's a deep choice point, and it's where often very um, planetary or celestially linked, um, across different eras and ages of life. So from that 28, but again at 42, where you can be said to having the midlife crisis. Um, they can be periods for people that can feel like it's a very dark night of the soul, and it's where there's a big shift in where you're referencing yourself from in terms of the collective, and then what has to be like cleared and cleansed away for you to rise healthily or continue to grow healthily within yourself. Um, we don't have appropriate understanding of what that is, so we will again go and medicate, or not have the spiritual support or the community support that can see, oh, you're going through a dark night of the soul. Here is how you can work with yourself. And there are stages and phases of kind of what that process is. Um, because it's a purification, it's an acceptance, a cleansing. There's this level of forgiveness. There's this level of really coming like so cleared away of yourself or your life, and so many things endings, marriage, relationship, house, like moving, job, like it can be quite big. And also then, as coping, as these things were falling apart, people will either turn to addiction. So now we're like, really, here is how I'm using my shadow, right to rock bottom, or right to that center point. And we can get stuck there. We can get stuck there because we don't have that initiation, spiritual initiation understanding of it. Or we can recognize that this is very powerful, and then begin to use ourselves. And again, I'm going to say use our energy. We have not yet come to recognize that our field and our energy system is a technology. Is a technology. And the more then we come into union with ourselves, and we'll be able to use our energy and use our consciousness to start to rise up out of a dark night of the soul phase. Yeah.
So a dark night of the soul tends to be longer. I mean, like, I know shadows like kind of, so my understanding is that as we're like cycling upwards, the shadow is going to kind of pop up and will eventually lessen until it's not so much like in our face anymore. Whereas like a dark night of soul is like a phase of just like shedding and releasing. And
correct. Yeah. Yeah. So shadow, we can go through, something will come up in our life, and then you realize, oh, wow, I've been doing this. There's a lot of dysfunction here for me, or there's something. And so now I'm going to start to address that shadow. And we can feel, well, that's really scary, or that's hard, or this is depressed, like I'm depressed, this is difficult to take responsibility for or confront. But, overarchingly, you can also still be like, while this is really hard and it does feel rough, I'm also good, whereas a dark night of the soul, it can be really quite crippling, especially when we have um, really identified ourselves with the material world. I'm this kind of mother or woman or person, and everybody thinks of me like this, and this is the successful life that I have, like that, and what have you. But if someone is going through a really powerful initiation for them in this lifetime, which may or may not happen to everyone, then suddenly, like, that's crushing, because you're suddenly losing how you've identified and seen yourself, and trying to cope and hold everything together, um, to really come down into a deeper and more true realization of who it is that you are now, to be able to then, express and create that out. And
Mhm.
if we don't do that well, we just handicap ourselves. So, we've got a few, we miss that opportunity. We can miss that opportunity for ourselves. And it's hard when a world or the collective is still very locked into particular kinds of ways that this is what makes a good person. And, they're seeing a very linear, very material, very like sort of two-dimensional.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, yeah, it
Yeah.
can feel hard then.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, we've covered so much in this episode. I just want to end with like, so what can we do as an individual right now, to kind of just make this shift and kind of like move towards this space that we've kind of just, been talking about in this episode, and just kind of, make our reality, our programming just the best that it can be, or the highest vibration, or, you know.
Come into our hearts,
Mm,
literally come into our hearts, come into the energy and the layered energy and experience of our heart, and that will plug you into everything else.
mhm.
And I think it's also a journey to come into our hearts too. I know, even if I sit in meditation, I ain't in my heart straight away.
Mm,
There's this quite a laid process, but as you're going into that, you'll start to really, really feel when you're coming into your heart, because you'll feel it in your body, you'll feel it in your energy, sensation, feeling, like you will feel it. And the more we can support ourselves to come into our hearts, then um, everything will flow far more easy for ourselves, and for the collective. That's ultimately the initiation as humanity that we're going towards. It's heart, and from there, it's integration of then the mind, and that alters everything.
mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, as always, Lauren, thank you so much for sharing your energy, your insight, your wisdom. I always love our conversations. So I appreciate it. I'm so grateful. And if you just want to let everyone know, I'll have it in the show notes, but if you want to let everyone know how they can find you or work with you, yeah.
Thank you. I'm like, oh, I think I just shared so much. Um, yeah, but thank you for always being open to me. I'm so
Of
grateful. I'm
course.
so grateful. Um, and yeah, just Inner Hue, INNERHUE. And so on Instagram, it's just Inner Hue or innerhue.com. That's where you can find me.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.